Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Indie Zone podcast. My name is Kathy. We're continuing to go through the numerous written rulings memorializing verbal proclamations from the bench that were made by Judge Hippler at the April 9th, 2025 hearings on numerous motions in limine, the order memorializing oral rulings on motions in limine. The next item that we want to look at regards to the motion in limine that was introduced by defendant. It is motion in limine number 5 regarding inconclusive data, and this has to do with statistical analysis of a swab taken from the fingernail clippings of one of the victims of 1122 King Road atrocities. It begins by stating here, defendant moves to limit expert testimony about the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab's statistical analysis of a swab taken from the fingernail clippings of Madison Mogan, and it's referenced as item Q 13.1 here. The testing revealed a likelihood ratio in the inconclusive range as to whether defendant was a potential contributor to the DNA mixture. During her grand jury testimony, the lab analyst, Jade Miller, testified that inconclusive meant she was, quote, unable to say one way or another whether or not, and then in parentheses, defendant is included in the mixture, end of quote. Defendant argues that this is misleading language in that it allows for an inference that defendant might, and that's italicized, that word, might, ladies and gentlemen, be included, which he asserts is inaccurate. The state indicates it will not offer the results of Q13.1 as inculpatory evidence, which defendant agrees renders his motion moot. However, if the state changes course with regard to the evidence, it must first raise the matter with the court outside the presence of the jury, so that the anticipated testimony regarding the meaning of inconclusive can be discussed. At this time, however, the motion is denied as moot. All right, so let's take a look at this first. This ruling appears at the bottom of page 6, going into a few lines onto page 7 if you would like to read it. Secondly, it says here inculpatory evidence. What is inculpatory? Inculpatory is the exact opposite of exculpatory evidence, which you may have remembered hearing in at least one of these in limine motions that we previously went over. Inculpatory evidence is evidence that would tend to prove a defendant's guilt. It's a fact that is not favorable to the defendant. Exculpatory, on the other hand, would be a fact that would tend to go in favor of the defense. It would tend to show that the defendant is not the perpetrator of whatever crimes the defendant is being charged with. Secondly, what does this term moot mean? Denied as moot. Well, this motion is not denied substantively. The court did not take issue with what the defense was saying, find the facts as applied to the law as incorrect. Something is moot when there's no longer any reason for a court to render a ruling on the issue. And what happened here was that the state has said it will not offer the results of Q13.1 as inculpatory evidence, which the defendant agreed render his motion moot. So therefore, there's nothing really here for Judge Hippler at this time to rule on. However, he's keeping the door open in the event there's some sort of a change in circumstance that Mr. Kohberger is free to bring this matter up again for the court's consideration. This will now conclude this episode of the Indie Zone podcast. My name's Kathy. Thanks for joining us here today.